Welcome back to Study Skills for Success in College. Thus far in this chapter, Chapter 5, Learning Styles, Memory, and Test Taking, we have talked about Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, which states that we have different types of intelligences, and within each person, some intelligences are more developed than others. We've also talked about understanding our learning styles and how this allows us to adapt to challenging classroom situations. In other words, it's important that we determine early on how we should study based upon our personal characteristics. If we struggle with a particular learning style, this doesn't mean that we should avoid it altogether. Students need to work on these areas and take steps to develop those skills. It's also important to know various study strategies in order to maximize the outcome. And the two types of memory are short and long term. Our goal in studying is to affect the long-term memory. There are several memory techniques that can be used, like clustering and mnemonics. So those are the objectives and the things we've discussed thus far. This is now lecture number 3 in a 3-lecture series on Chapter 5. So in this particular lecture, we discuss strategies to improve your test-taking skills and to develop strategies to interact positively with faculty. One area that concerns most students is how to do well on exams, obviously. We want to do well on exams. That's why we're taking the class. I would hope primarily to learn, but we're going to show that, or evidence of that learning will be seen in a successful exam. And developing your personalized test-taking strategies will improve those end results. But let's start with an initial assessment of your test-taking skills in exercise 5-6. So just as there are active reading, listening, and study strategies that we discussed in the previous lecture, there are also active test-taking strategies. Pause the video to do exercise 5-7. What test-taking strategies do you use before you listen to more? Okay, for that exercise, to the second item, identify the strategies you used to prepare for the exam. Most students might write, I looked over my notes, or I read the textbook. Well, these strategies are going to get you only so far, even if you feel they worked for you in the past. So what's better? It's better to use what's called, instead of passive strategies like I looked over my notes, I read the textbook, active strategies. It's better to use active strategies because they require you to do more than just look at or read over materials. These types of strategies, active strategies, require you to write and rehearse materials. For example, by constructing flashcards and reviewing them, rather than merely looking at notes and other materials. But here's the deal. Active strategies, by virtue of the nature of the strategy, require a commitment and determination that goes beyond passive activity. What follows are some examples of active strategies. Creating cards, developing your own study guide, studying in small groups, outlining your chapters, drawing concept maps. And for creating cards and drawing concept maps, be sure to look at figure 5-2, which shows how that's done. And then practicing, developing and practicing questions or a mock exam. So developing these study materials and then reviewing them at least a week before the exam, and we'll talk more on that. But that will give you or help you to do well, and can also help your stress levels because you'll have a greater feeling of control, more confidence. And use 3 or more different active strategies, preferably a week or so in advance of your actual exam. To reduce test anxiety, there's no substitute for being prepared. Preparing properly, using good study habits, should help with how nervous you feel on test day. However, much like any other performance, it's normal to have some anxiety about taking an exam. Think back to chapter 1 on anxiety. And it doesn't matter, by the way, how much you've prepared, there will always be a certain degree of anxiety. Use time management strategies to prepare for your exam. So set aside time each day on your weekly and daily schedules to study on your desk calendar. If you're a full-time student, you may notice that exams seem to happen all at once, and that is true for some reason. You call it Murphy's Law, whatever. I know that when I was in college, during the years that I spent in college, it always seemed to happen. It's common to have no exams one week and then all of a sudden you've got all these exams. So for that reason alone, time management is key to making sure you prepare for all of them. And exercise 5-9 can help with this topic. Begin to study at least a week before an exam and schedule study time each day the week before the exam. Make sure you study all the material. Sometimes it's tempting to do what's comfortable and focus on the material you already know well instead of what's challenging, right? It's certainly important to study material you already know because overlearning, which is continuing to review material even once you know it, will help you to do well on the test even if you're nervous. But students sometimes avoid studying material they don't know as well, which is a mistake. Don't avoid difficult topics or ignore feelings of frustration. Face your fears and confusion, and also make sure that you're using resources near you. Seek assistance from your teacher or tutors if they're available, and classmates that seem to be doing well. Your strategies don't end once you begin taking your exam. Several strategies can be used during an exam to make sure that you are successful or to maximize those chances. These strategies begin with time management and include determining what kind of exam you'll be taking. Let's talk a bit about time management. Arrive at an exam a few minutes early so you don't feel rushed. Pace yourself during the exam. Allow enough time to complete each section, but don't take so long that you run out of time and don't complete the entire test. If you finish early, use that extra time to review your answers. But be cautious about making changes if you're not sure. It's usually a bad idea to change answers unless you know with 100% certainty that your original response was a mistake. More often than not, when students change answers, guess what? Turns out they had the right answer to begin with. Just trust your gut. Where to start? Some people develop their own test-taking strategies. For example, they may do all the easy questions first and then return to the more difficult ones. Make sure you mark the questions you skipped, or you may forget to return to them. Don't spend too much time on the items you aren't confident about. And finally, don't destroy your old exams. Keep them. They're there to learn from. And now hints for objective exams. What is an objective exam? Well, these are exams that involve questions with definite right or wrong answers. There's only two options. Types of objective exams include multiple choice, true or false, matching, and other tests, where the questions have answers that are either correct or incorrect. That's an objective item. When taking these types of exams with these types of items, be sure you understand all the directions, read them all. Usually your first idea about the answer is your best. Again, to put it bluntly, go with your gut. Here's one good technique for multiple choice questions. Read the question, but cover the options with your hand or a piece of paper. With multiple choice questions, there are usually 4 to 5 options. Cover those up before you read them. That's a great technique for making sure and becoming more confident about whether or not you know the answer. Be aware of qualifiers in these questions. Qualifiers are words like all, most, none, never, mainly. If the question asks if something is always true, the answer might be no, even if that thing is sometimes true. For example, does March 1st always follow February 28th? The answer is no, because during a leap year, February 29th would follow the 28th. These words are really important when it comes to figuring out the right answer. In linguistics, we refer to these types of terms as hyperbole. Let's take a look at some hints for subjective exams. What is a subjective exam? Well, we just looked at objective exams, which include things like multiple choice, true, false, matching, that sort of thing. But a subjective exam can involve short answer and essay questions. It's a test where how you answer can be as important as what your answer is. When taking these types of exams, plan your time. Questions asking for longer answers won't just take longer, they'll probably be worth more points as well, right? So plan accordingly. For short answers, stick to the main points that directly answer the question. Essays require more writing and usually more work. It almost always helps to take a few minutes and do some pre-writing. Sketch out information you need to include, maybe in an informal outline. You can then concentrate on writing without worrying that you'll forget important information in the process. Organization is important in writing for exams. Look to the question for clues as to format. For example, essays often involve comparing and contrasting. You could see exercise 5-10 for more on this. For this type of essay question, first compare or write about similarities between the concepts, and then contrast, that is, write about their differences. Here are some other key words that you'll find in exam questions. Explain. This means you need to demonstrate your understanding. Define. This means you need to provide, of course, a definition and a precise description of the term or concept. Discuss. This means you need to consider possible points of view on a topic, usually more than one. Summarize means you need to present the main main points of the topic rather than all of the details. Argue means you need to present an opinion in an informed way. You need to back up your opinion with facts or information from other sources. To compare means you need to identify similarities. And to contrast means you identify differences. When finally turning in their exams, students either feel defeated or successful. Defeated. It's rather discouraging, isn't it? And successful after you've finished an exam is rather exquisite. After an exam, some students eagerly look up the answers to questions they think they might have missed. Others avoid doing this like the plague. They don't want to face the facts. Regardless, many students do not take advantage of post-exam strategies that can enhance their learning over the long term. Now, whether or not you did well on an exam, you should note the items you answered easily as well as those you struggled with or missed. This information will help you have a comprehensive final, or if the material comes up in other courses. By comprehensive final, I mean it's a final exam that includes information that you had in a shorter exam. Right after an exam, evaluate the strategies you used. Did you spend enough time studying? Did you study everything you needed? Are there particular content areas where you were stronger or weaker than others? Finally, if you do poorly on an exam, take the time to meet with your instructor. Reviewing the exam together may help you improve in the future. Most instructors have office hours when they're available to meet with students. Many students don't take advantage of this opportunity. Showing positive concern about your performance on the exam will show that you care about your academics. As long as you make a good impression and avoid making excuses or coming off as defensive, and I'll cover that in just a minute. If you send a written message to your instructor, be sure to avoid defensive statements. Here it is. Always reread your email aloud. Ask yourself, how would this come across? For example, if you believe that you correctly answered one of the subjective questions on an exam, that is, one of the questions that required you to write extensively about it, first off, don't assume that there's no way that you were wrong. That's called arrogance. In fact, it's wise to approach this topic with the attitude that there must be something that you didn't understand. So instead of stating, Mr. McGill, I know I got number 5 right. I studied it for like 4 hours last night. How about this? Hi, Mr. McGill. I hope things are going well for you. I was just wondering about question number 5. Would you mind explaining to me how I could have improved? First, unlike the first email, the second approach does not include yelling. What do I mean by that? Well, in writing, more than one exclamation point means yelling. That's important to know. So the second one, rather, takes a calm approach. And secondly, you're acknowledging that the instructor marked the answer wrong for a reason. I would also note that with the second approach, many instructors would be willing to reconsider how many points were docked from the test for that particular question. And some would even dock fewer points. When, on the other hand, you attempt to force your will upon the professor, you not only reduce the chance that he or she will reconsider, but you've also burned a bridge. Oops. Take 30 seconds or so to read the top 10 things instructors are looking for in a student. I hope these concepts and tips have been helpful. Now let's take a look at what we've learned.